hope you meet them by the end of the day. If you would, open your Bibles today and open it up to Proverbs chapter 1. We're going to continue our series through the book of Proverbs. And last week we took a broad look at what the reason Solomon gave these collection of Proverbs for. The purpose is to give us wisdom. It's to pass wisdom. Solomon was the wisest king in all of history. You know, God came to Solomon when he became king and said, Solomon, I'm going to give you one wish. If you were to ask for one thing, what would you ask for? And Solomon said, wisdom. Wisdom. How many of us would ask for money or ask for power or ask for fame and a bunch of followers? But Solomon was wise enough to ask for more wisdom. Wisdom that comes from God. And last week we talked about what is wisdom. There's two types of wisdom. There's man's wisdom and there's God's wisdom. And the whole journey of life is the battle between seeking God's wisdom and man's wisdom. You know, God's wisdom is this. It's a skilled knowledge of good and evil that gives us discernment and discipline to continue in the process of becoming more like Christ. Those were all the points that we went over last week, put together in one definition of what wisdom is. And so this morning, last week again, we looked at the first 7 verses and we saw what is wisdom. And so beginning in verse 9 this morning and on through chapter 9, we're going to start seeing certain situations. Remember, we said proverb is a representation of what life is really like. And so Solomon is taking what life is really like and telling us how to guide and get ourselves through it. And so this morning we're going to see our first situation. But before we get into that, I want to tell a story this morning of a man named George C. Parker. Has anyone heard of that name before? George C. Parker. You know, in the long list and long history of con artists in the United States, George C. Parker is probably at the top of them. See, George C. Parker was a man who lived in New York City. You know what he lived on? He would take popular tourist destinations. If you've been to New York, you've probably heard of Grant's Tomb, Madison Square Garden, the Statue of Liberty, and Brooklyn Bridge. See, what George C. Parker would do, he would sell those to people. And guess what? He wasn't the owner of them. And so the one that he would popularly do or commonly do was he would try to sell the Brooklyn Bridge. And it's been told that George C. Parker, not the owner of any of these properties in New York, he sold the Brooklyn Bridge twice a week for 30 years. What he would do is he would pay the shipmen coming in. He would pay them to give him information on families that were coming into the United States for the first time. And when he got the information on the family for the first time coming to New York City, he would go up to them and present them all these documents, say, hey, I'm the owner of the Brooklyn Bridge, you know, where everyone's going right now, the tourists, the tour and stuff. I will give you a grand deal. And guess how much he sold the bridge to so many people for? $5. Shouldn't that kind of give you an alarm? The Brooklyn Bridge sold for $5. He would vary it. Obviously, the more successful it became, he added the price, wouldn't you, if you're going to buy with this? And so hopefully you're not doing this, by the way. Out and so there's not much in Radford. I guess you could sell the bridge there in Radford. But he would take these documents that look so good, and as the immigrants come in to have a new living, they would say, wow, I'm going to make a lot of money. So many people every week would sign the dotted line saying, I own the Brooklyn Bridge. You know, George C. Parker was so good at this that the policemen would often come to the owners. They would go to the owners, the names that he sold this to, and tell them the laws and say, hey, we're going to have to shut down the tax polls that you guys have out there. And so even the policemen believed that there were new owners of the Brooklyn Bridge. He was good. You know, he was not only a skilled salesman, but he was also knowledgeable that people are gullible, aren't they? They are gullible if they don't have the right kind of wisdom in their life. You know, George C. Parker finally got convicted of this crime. He finally got caught. On his third conviction, he was finally sentenced to life in prison. You know, this story lays the groundwork to exactly what we're going to be dealing with in the text this morning. That Solomon is talking to his son about. Solomon's going to give wisdom to a group of, to his son regarding a group of people in the world that are going to try to convince you to get an unhealthy kind of gain in your life at the expense of someone else. And that's exactly where we're going to be at. We're going to understand by the end of the day that when you seek the wisdom of God, friends, I'm about to give you the whole summary of the sermon here at the beginning. When you seek the wisdom of God, you will gain far more than what the wisdom of man can offer you. And so if you would, let's take our time. Let's go ahead and stand to our feet this morning and give honor to God's word this morning. Let's begin reading Proverbs 1, verses 8 to 19. Proverbs 1, beginning in verse 8, says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother, for they will be a graceful ornament on your head, and chains about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them like Sheol and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our house with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let's all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owner." And so may God bless the reading of his word. You may be seated this morning. And this morning we're going to see a pretty common outline we'll probably see throughout the book of Proverbs. But see, the real reason, I mentioned last week that a lot of pastors struggle with preaching verse by verse through the book of Proverbs. They usually just take topics and about 6 weeks and then go on to the next one. And but I would like to take the challenge, and God's led me to go verse by verse through the book of Proverbs. And we understand that when you go through the book of Proverbs, we're probably going to have a common outline each week, but you got to realize the situation that Solomon is talking about. And so this morning we understand the backdrop is he's given wisdom regarding a group of people, what we would call in modern terms a gang. He's keeping his son from being involved in a gang and gang activity through this life. The first thing we see on our sermon guide this morning is the offer of wisdom. We have to understand that although wisdom is offered, it's not always received, is it? And so Solomon is urging his son to receive this wisdom. And so he gives him the wisdom, and we see the wisdom offered in the first 2 verses we see in Proverbs. Look at verse 8 with me again. My son. Again, we're going to see for the next 9 chapters this phrase often. I went over and highlighted through Scripture this throughout chapter 9. Every first verse of the chapter says, "Hear my children," or "Hear my son," "Listen, my son." And it starts the same way here. It's a conversation between a father and a son. But we're going to quickly understand that it's not just between the father and the son. Who else is in it? Look at verse 8. "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of" who? Your mother. Your mom. All the moms say, "Mom," yeah, son and daughter, listen to this verse. And so maybe I should save this one for next week on Mother's Day. But see, Solomon says, "Son, listen to me. Listen to the wisdom and instruction that I'm giving you." Now, Solomon's a good teacher, and we understand he's a good teacher because he not only tells his son here to listen, but he gives him the reason why he should listen to the instruction. I mean, at the first time we read through this verse, we kind of come and say, well, who does Solomon think he is that, he's just got all the wisdom in the world that is so valuable to his son? But he does realize that. Because again, when Solomon became king and he was granted wisdom, where did that wisdom come from? Came from God. Friends, if you're seeking the wisdom of God this morning, you are one of the wisest people on this earth. Do you know that? Do you realize that? Your pursuit of wisdom qualifies you to be one of the wisest people on this earth. And so Solomon says, "Son, listen to my instruction." Now, what is the son probably saying here? How do all children listen to their parents in their young age? You think the son's saying, "Oh, absolutely, Mom and Dad, I'm listening to everything you have. I'm soaking it all in," right? But he gives them the reason why. And this reason why will probably convince any son and daughter in this room to listen to the wisdom of their father and mother who's pursuing Christ. The reason's found in verse 9. What is the reason? "For they will be a graceful ornament around your head." If you listen and heed the wisdom of the parents, what Solomon's saying, it's going to be a precious ornament, or in other words, your translation might say a garland around your neck. This is referring to fine jewelry. It's the same, fine jewelry at this time is the same thing, same effect of fine jewelry today. You know, most jewelry is obtained at a great price. You either pay a great price or there's a lot of history behind jewelry. How many of you would say this morning that you have a piece of jewelry that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation in your family? Any kind of piece of jewelry or anything alike or any item in your house, there's history behind it. There's stories behind it. There's value behind it. It's a great price. And when you wear that piece of jewelry, people notice it, don't they? You get a new ring, you get a new necklace, you get all that. They notice the new jewelry. That's what Solomon's saying. The wisdom and instruction I'm giving you, son, is going to be like a fine piece of jewelry. It came at a great price. It's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. You know, we see in chapter 4, you don't have to turn there right now, but in chapter 4, verse 9, we see this analogy again, that it's a garland around their neck. It's a graceful ornament. But in verse 9 of chapter 4, it's in parallel with a medal. It's a crown, a victor's crown. He says, if you heed the instruction of your mother and myself, listen, friend, you're going to have like a medal around your neck. I remember when in middle school, most AAU tournaments, they give us trophies, or hardly anything really if we won a tournament. But one tournament in particular gave us a medal, a big shiny medal. And it wasn't one of them participation medals. It was only for the champion, okay? And so we happened to defeat a team that is in this area as well. There's two teams in the New River Valley. And so our team beat the other team in the New River Valley. So guess what? Half of that team was in school Monday morning. And so guess what our team decided? We're going to wear these medals through the hallways, and people are going to notice us. Think of the Olympic medals when they... See, that's the idea. I don't have to keep going. That's the idea. He said, you receive and heed the instruction of your mother and myself. He said, it's going to be a medal. It's going to be a victor's crown. It's going to be something that people notice. So let's just summarize. If you heed the instruction of your mother and father, Solomon says, it's going to make you more attractive. And half of you are like, hello, I'm in now. So before we go on, though, in this passage, before we go on to look at this situation, I think it's wise of us to stop here and not only talk to the sons and daughters in the room, but also to talk to the moms and dads too, isn't it? What a great passage. We see the role of what a mother and a father is supposed to do here. You, as parents, are supposed to be the biggest mentors in your children's life. Are you passing down wisdom to your children? You know, we see the responsibility here, and we understand that we are to be, or you all are to be, I'm not a parent yet, but parents in this room, you are to be the biggest mentors to your children all of their life. You know, the main role of a parent, the reason God has blessed you, has gifted you with a child, is so that you can give them a heads up and what life is all about. You know, when you give your children a heads up about what life is all about, this is what it is. It's not just giving them what they want to hear. How often in life are they always going to receive what they want to hear? So as a parent, you can't just give them what they want to hear. Being a good mom, being a good dad is all about giving them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. That's often very tough conversations, isn't it? Me growing up, I received conversations that I needed to hear, but I didn't want to hear. I hated it back then, but I value it now. So parents, you give the wisdom to your children that they need to hear instead of what they want to hear. And on the flip side, you don't give them what you want them to hear. Sometimes we cater to what we lecture to our children because we want to protect them from what life is all about. No, the reason Solomon's given us these wisdoms is to give us these representations of what life is. Friends, if you're a mom and dad, whether you're married this morning, whether you're single this morning, whether you're widowed this morning, if you pursue the wisdom of God and you couple it with the experience that you have in life, you are a great mom or you are a great dad. Understand that. Your mistakes don't hold you back. Your mistakes make you stronger as a mom and dad. Don't go through life trying to be a parent and say, you know, I've made all these mistakes. I'm not a good... No, because you've made mistakes in life and you've learned those lessons. Use those experiences to help your child not go through the same thing. And so, friends, if you're a mom and dad this morning, you can be the best that you are. You can be the best mom and dad because when you couple it with the wisdom of God and you couple it with your experience in life, friends, you can be the best parent. And so Solomon gives us not only instruction to the son and daughter, but he also gives us instruction to the parents as well. So with that big backdrop, and I don't want to lose you anymore here this morning, we now get into this situation. We now see number 2 on our screen this morning is wisdom given. He offers it wisdom. He's saying, hey, look, son, I'm about to give you some wisdom. And now he gives us the wisdom. My son, hear the instruction of your father and your mother. Look at verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol. And so here we are again about the gang activity, this group of people that are out to take someone's life to receive gain. Solomon's not saying to his son here, he doesn't say if they come to you, as if it may or may not. See, the tone here is Solomon saying is when these group of people come to you to try to convince you to join them, stay away. Solomon's saying these group of people are going to come up to you, son. And we think here this morning, and we think through our life, and we say, well, no one has really came up to me in that kind of situation that's laid out here in Proverbs 1. Well, let's break it down a little bit, and let's see how it may relate to us more than we think this morning. Solomon gives them 4 tips, 4 wise tips here in regarding these sinners or these group of people that are out to really kill in order to gain. The first one is this. It's the 3 words, just say no. Can you say those 3 words with me? Just say no. How many of you have flashbacks to elementary school? The just say no programs. Just say no to drugs. Just say no, okay? Don't even give any idea or thought that no, just say no. I can see parents yelling at their kids, just say no if you run into the situation. And that's exactly what Solomon says here. Verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you, what did he say? Do not consent. Don't give in. So he's saying in the forefront, we're starting to see that we see the description of what these group of people are saying. They're saying, hey, let's lurk secretly, let's hide secretly, let's take a life. And we all, right in this situation, read that and we're like, who would even say yes to that? But Solomon's wise, isn't he? You know, sometimes things seem more convincing around certain groups of people, and it seems more convincing with other people. And then when it comes to having the conversation with your mom and dad, all of a sudden it's not convincing at all, is it? It becomes different. And Solomon's saying, I'm going to give you a heads up, man. This is going to happen. I know if you get in this situation, you're going to be convinced otherwise. But I'm telling you from the very beginning, remember, discernment. You see the end result. You use it from the beginning so you can make the right decision. Solomon's saying, just say no, friends. Well, the second thing is this. He goes on and says, keep the door closed. Keep the door closed. You know, there's nothing worse in life than an open door. I'm not talking about like if one of these doors are open, you know. I'm talking about the doors in life, the doors of temptation in life. There's nothing worse than an open door. That's probably the wisest thing that I learned, especially in my college years. There's nothing worse than you opening the door. You know why? Because once you open a door, what happens? You see what's on the other side of that door. And sometimes we go through life and we didn't heed the instruction, just say no. So we kind of start investigating. We crack open the door. We kind of peek around. And then all of a sudden we see what's on the other side. And sometimes we see what's on the other side. We like it for a moment. And all of a sudden we're like, oh, no, I shouldn't have done that. But I'm going to crack it open a little more. I want to see more. What else is on the other side? Guess what? When you open the door, it's nearly impossible to close back, isn't it? We all can agree to that. We can all agree through our lives that we've opened doors that we should have never opened. We thought we could close them. In fact, they became as heavy as ever, trying to close them back. That's what Solomon's saying here. He's saying, if they entice you, keep the door shut. Just say no. And he said, listen, friends, let me tell you what's on the other side of the door. Look how they entice people. Look how this group entices. They say, come with us. Let us lie and wait. Let us be patient. Let's hide so we can shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them like Sheol. Let's take their life. So we can find look at verse 13, the reason why they want to do all those things. We can find all kinds of precious possessions. We can steal stuff. We can take all that they have so we can have gain. Then they say in verse 14, cast in your lot, put a little bit in the pot, put a little skin in the game so we can have a bigger purse at the end of the day. Solomon's saying, son, listen, that's what they're going to say. That's what's on the side of the door. You don't want to go there. Keep the door shut. The third thing he tells us is this: one step is too far. One step in temptation is too far. Should look at verse 15. So he says, do not consent. Then in verses 10 to 14, he says, this is what's on the other side. Then verse 15, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path. Now I want you to look at that last phrase in verse 15. Does Solomon say keep your feet from their path? What does he say? Keep your foot from their path. Solomon's saying just one step is too far. One step in the path of sinners is too far. Do you realize how many convictions each year in the courtroom? How many people that find themselves in the courtroom and nothing but tears and crying and pleading with the judge? They say, I didn't do anything. I wasn't the one that planned this. I wasn't. And guess what the judge says? You were there. You are guilty by what? Association. Friends, do you realize one step you take in temptation is enough to leave you in an eternity full of punishment? And it's called hell. One step is enough to justify your eternity separate from the Father. So when we see these temptations, and again, we see this illustration, this scenario that people are going to entice to take out other people so that we can gain. And he says, listen, friends, know what's on the other side. Just say no. Don't even take as little as one step, because one step is way too far. And the last thing he says is, what goes around, finish that with me. What goes around comes around. Look at verse 17. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. But they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So what goes around comes around. And so Solomon's saying, look, just say no, because this is what's on the other side. One step is going to be damaging, because this is always the end result of these people who are enticing others to take out others for their own gain. He says, what goes around comes around. In verse 17, he gives us an illustration. And we begin seeing again the battle of wisdom with man and the battle of wisdom from God. And in verse 17, he gives a little glimpse of how wise people are. He uses the illustration of what kind of animal? Verse 17, birds. I think God laughs at me because I feel like every passage I open, there's an illustration about a bird in it. And my love for birds are just going to have to happen in my life, I guess. But surely in vain the net is spread. So what he's saying is even birds in nature, if they see a trap, they're not going to go in it. There's a lot of animals, yeah, you can catch them with traps, but there's a lot of animals like, I ain't going near that. I know it's all about that over there. How many of you set a trap and the food in the trap is gone, but no animal was inside the trap? Animals are smarter. Birds are smarter. Friends, sometimes man thinks he's wise, but he can't even see the trap that lies in front of him. But birds can. And so Solomon's saying, listen, pursue the wisdom of God, not man, because man's not that smart. They fall into their own trap. Verse 18, they lie in wait for their own blood. So as they just say, come with us, we're going to lie in wait for others' blood. What does it say? They're actually lying in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. What goes around comes around. Now we've seen the wisdom offered and we've seen the wisdom given. Now, the last thing we have to look at this morning is this. We see the wisdom applied. The wisdom applied. Look down at your Bibles at one verse, which is verse 19. He comes out of this conversation. He says, so are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of his owner. I want you to notice the word, so are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. You know, we could come to this proverb and we could look at it and say, Timothy, I've never been tempted this way, so this passage isn't for me. But I want to ask you the question, have you been tempted this way? Have you been tempted in a way to take out someone for your own good? Here it says, the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. I don't know about you, but the flesh that God's word talks about all the time, the flesh that we not so often we don't want to live according to the flesh, but so often our flesh is greedy, it's envious, it's full of hatred. Sometimes that is who our identity is apart from Christ. And so all of us do struggle with the greedy for gain sin that's in our life, the temptation for gain. Friends, all of us in this room have dealt with the temptation to take someone else out so that we can gain so much more for ourselves. Yes, obviously, verse 19 talks about money. The situation it talks about is given from money, but then he applies it and says, everyone who is just greedy for gain. And he doesn't say greedy for more money, greedy for gain and wealth. He doesn't get descriptive here. He keeps it broad because he realizes that every single person's heart in this room, because we are all sinners, is greedy for gain. Yes, it involves money, but how else can this look in someone's life? Well, it happens in many forms today. How about bullies in school? How many times have you been in school or in your workplace? Not only bullies when we think about like in school or movies where they pin them up against the locker and then they turn them around and say, give me your lunch money. Not bullies like that. Bullies today are the ones that get in groups of people together in the corner and just start talking and gossiping about others. People that ruin other people's reputations. You are taking the life of someone else so that you can be made higher, so that you can gain more in your life. How about this? Politicians going against their own people for gain. We can all agree on that. Politicians, and national politicians all doing stuff. They'll backstab people so they can gain the votes. National leaders such as and throughout history, Hitler and Stalin and many others. How about tearing down others that don't believe the same thing as you do? We attack them. I've already mentioned people who gather together to gossip. You know why gossip is a sin, by the way? You know why gossip is spoken more highly in the Bible than we all think sometimes? Because gossip is a form of murder. Gossip is a form of murder. Because when you gossip, you have a hatred in your heart towards someone else, don't you? And God's word says that when you have hatred in your heart, you are a murderer. Friends, neglect the temptation to gossip. I've been on my knees many times, even this week. Father, even this morning, Father, forgive me for my gossip. You're tearing down someone else's reputation so you can lift yours up. You're taking out someone else so you can gain even more. That's the same situation we see here in Proverbs, isn't it? We can continue on, fighting, uprising, grumbling, even inside the church today. It all continues on, workplace, home. It doesn't matter where it is, friends. We all can relate to this temptation with a group of people that come together to entice you to take someone else out for your own gain. You know what happens with a group of people? Guess where it starts? It starts with one person. Some of us may have been that one person that has formed a group up. Some of us have maybe said yes to a former group. I've been on both sides of that coin. I've started groups of people to tear down others, to put myself above the others. I find myself more apt to say yes to people who are trying to tear down others than I am to say yes to people who are trying to encourage others. I mean, how many times have you spoken about someone, even in this church, and compare that with how many times you've written an encouragement card that's on the back of your pew? Friends, we've all faced this temptation. I'm not singling out anything, and I'm just saying we can relate to this. The commentaries I read this week gave this point, and it just struck me through the heart. We have all dealt with this. We fall short of the glory of God, but thank the Lord, He's given us wisdom that comes only from Him. And it's a process for us to be disciplined enough to follow Him and have that skilled knowledge of good and evil in our life so we can grow closer and become more like Him. And so, friends, this morning, I want to give you one verse that we all know to keep in mind this week with these temptations. And sometimes, yes, the most common application to this verse is to gain wealth and money in a heavier wallet. But I want you to understand, I want you to remember that this enticing of taking other people down for our own gain can happen in many other forms. Matthew 16:26, for what profit is it to a man if he gains the what? The whole world, and loses his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? As we wrap up this morning, I want to ask you, are you thinking of any New Testament story that fits with this? Any story that happened in the Gospels right before Jesus was nailed to the cross? Judas. Judas thought he was going to gain more money if he helped a group of people take out someone's life. That person's life was Jesus Christ. So Judas agreed to that. Judas was following Jesus all these years. Judas was right there by Jesus' side. And yet when they waved a bag of money in front of his face, Judas says, yes, give me that money and I will help you take out this man named Jesus. And so as Judas agreed to that deal, he says, I'm going to gain this money and gain it all. Gain it all. You know, Jesus has been talking about all this persecution stuff if we follow him. I'm going to gain so much more because I'm going to have the reputation of all these people who are against him, and I'm going to have a big sack of money. And so he goes through with it. And you know what the end of the story is? At one point, both Jesus and Judas was dead. And then 3 days later, one is risen and one is still dead. See, friends, we all battle with this temptation, but let me leave you with this encouragement this morning. Jesus can help you overcome that temptation to fall into a group of people that are always out to get others for their own gain. Jesus was nailed to the cross by the help of Judas, who pursued money over wisdom. Judas thought he was going to live longer than Jesus. Jesus went in our place because we suffer with this sinful attitudes and these sinful lifestyles. And he was nailed to the cross in place for our place, friends. And today, Jesus is alive. Judas isn't. So here we are again as we close this morning. The decision is yours. Are you going to pursue godly wisdom when people entice you? Or are you going to pursue the wisdom of man? One lives forever and one has a short life. Think of George Parker, who gained millions of dollars from lying his way from selling the Brooklyn Bridge to people who were just so gullible. Friends, you're more gullible than you make yourself to be sometimes. Put yourself on guard. I have one more statement this morning, a quote to give us and we'll be done. Raymond Ortland Jr. says in his commentary that talks about the greedy gain, the greediness for gain. He says, at its core, unjust gain succeeds by stepping on others. Unjust gain succeeds by stepping on others. How are you being successful in life? Is it by stepping on others, or is it by lowering yourself and lifting others up as God's words promise? I want you to stand to your feet this morning. Let's bow our heads today and